Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining today. Lovely weather we have outside. It's really in contrast to what we're experiencing right now in Switzerland. So I'm very happy to be here. Today, or maybe just before I get into any amount of detail, my name is Quintin. I'm part of the IATA Environment and Sustainability team. We're based in Geneva, Switzerland. And today I want to talk to you about IENVA. It's a program that we run, and this program is an environmental management system. And I want to talk to you specifically about how our airlines actually use this program to introduce environmental sustainability practices within their businesses. So before I get into any more details on this, I want to take you back about 10 years. Really the origins of this program, so where this program started, and to really understand the objectives of this program, we need to go back to see when we started this program. Approximately 10 years ago, a number of our member airlines expressed the need to comply with ISO 14001. ISO 14001, to those of you that have knowledge of this, of the ISO 14001 standard, would also understand that it's a management system, it's a generic management system that many businesses across the world would use to implement environmental and sustainability management practices within their businesses. But the key word over here is it is generic. It's generic standards, it's generic guidance, and this makes it quite complicated to implement into a complicated business. And I think we can all appreciate that the airline business is a complicated business if you take into account how airlines operate. We don't operate on our own. We operate in this very complicated infrastructure. We have ground handlers, we have MRO service providers, base maintenance, line maintenance, all the different kinds of ground handlers, airside service providers, caterers, all of these, oh yes, and of course airports. We all work together to enable our airlines to fly. So, taking a generic management system approach and implementing those standards in an airline can be very complicated. And that's where IENVA was born. So, in short, IENVA is the short name for the IATA Environmental Assessment Program. So, before I get into detail on how we do that, how we integrate sustainability into existing airlines, I want to talk to you about the pillars that this program is based on. The first pillar is a community approach. As airlines, we can all appreciate that we face similar challenges. We fly the same equipment. We fly into similar airports. We fly into usually similar regions and legal jurisdictions. So we face the same challenges, which also means that we face, or that we have we often have similar solutions. So we take a community approach, or this community approach, to look at solutions, and we build best practice and tools and make this available to the airlines that are part of this program to just take these tools without reinventing the wheel, if not necessary, just taking these tools and these practices and implementing that into the airline business. The second pillar that this program is built on is a risk-based approach. So essentially a risk-based approach, while we appreciate that our airlines are very similar, we also appreciate that there are unique issues that some of our airlines may face. Flying into specific regions, flying into certain biologically sensitive habitats, or just special compliance obligations that certain airlines need to comply with. A risk-based approach helps us to take into account the specific requirements of the specific context of each airline that are part of our program, including resource availability, financial resource availability, the regions the airline operate, the kind of activities the airline are part of. So it really allows this program to not discriminate against airlines that are bigger and airlines that are smaller, airlines with lots of resources and airlines with fewer resources. And I'm going to talk to you about the third pillar, and this is our external assessment. So our program is built on the external assessment. Those of you in the aviation industry would be no stranger to IATA audits. IATA audits is our industry safety standard, and IATA assessments are just mirrors the IATA audit process. So any of our airlines that go through this process to have or to be registered in the IATA program would be no stranger to the assessment process. This external assessment also allows our airlines to be recognized for their efforts in environmental management implementation into their businesses. So this is continually being recognized more and more, not only by our passengers, not only by the other business stakeholders like co-chair partners, alliances, but more and more now being recognized by financial service providers, investors, financiers, and banks, also rating agencies. So for airlines that are part of this program, it's a great way to show it's a lesser risk for some investments. And this is just something that is increasing. So I've got a few minutes left, and I want to talk to you about exactly how we do go about implementing environmental sustainability into our airlines. This is a very pragmatic but also systematic approach. This does not just apply to airlines. This can be applied to any business, but we apply this specifically to airlines. We've got the knowledge and the experience to apply this specifically to airlines. So I'll take you through this process very briefly before I end. So the first step is, what is the first step that an environmentally sustainable business need to have? What's the most important thing? Leadership buy-in from the top. Leadership support, leadership accountability for environmental sustainability. That's the first thing. If you don't have that, it becomes very difficult to move ahead in your company or your airline with environmental sustainability initiatives, practices. The second step is a vision. A vision that says where you want to be, where you are going. It tells not only your staff, but also your investors, your external stakeholders, exactly where you want your airline to be 5 years from now, 10 years from now, perhaps even 15 or 20 years from now. Depends on how ambitious you want your airline to be. This vision can be redacted to, well, what can it be in real life? What are we talking about? In real life, in practical terms, a vision is just, you walk into your airline lobby, what do you see on the wall? You perhaps see an environmental sustainability policy statement. Walk into a cafeteria, you see an environmental policy statement against the wall. In more modern times, we see this on the website. You go onto an airline's website and you see this environmental policy statement on the website. This gives the external stakeholders the view, and it enables them to see where this airline is then positioned from an environmental sustainability point of view. And by the way, this is the first step that most companies will do when they start engaging with your business, with your airline, is trying to understand where do you position yourself on the environmental sustainability spectrum. Once you have that vision, that direction, our next step in the program, which is fundamental, is understanding exactly what you have in the scope of your airline. So in our program, we have a mandatory minimum scope. The reason we can have a mandatory minimum scope is because we're an industry-specific application, because our members are airlines. So for those of you that's in the airline industry, our mandatory minimum scope is global flight operations and corporate activities and buildings within the country where the AOC is registered. I'm sure there are a lot more questions on that one specifically, but I need to press on, and I'll talk to you about the next step. Once we understand exactly what the activities that are happening within the scope, so global flight operations, where is it taking place, where are you flying to, what compliance obligations might you encounter wherever you are operating, and where are your corporate buildings and activities located. Then we look at what potential environmental aspects and impacts might be related to those activities. What stakeholders do you have that's related to that? What compliance obligations do you have that's related to that? And also, of course, risks and opportunities related to the scope. So if you think through this practically, you may come to a point and realize, but we may end up with hundreds, if not thousands, of environmental aspects and impacts from all our flight operations all across the world, and our buildings in our country of origin, and the activities that we're carrying out. So hundreds and thousands of environmental aspects and impacts, risks and opportunities, environmental influences, stakeholders. They are countless. They can be countless. So how do we deal with all of this as an airline? Well, we don't deal with all of them. We don't have endless resources. So in our program's process, which is a fundamental part of our program, is a standardized prioritization procedure. The standardized prioritization procedure takes into account the resource availability of the specific airline, the geographical location of the airline, the activities that this specific airline has within its scope. So it's very particular to the airline, which essentially makes this very long list of potential issues. It makes it a list to perhaps 5 or 10 issues that the airline would now go ahead and address. So as you can see, it's a very systematic process, but pragmatic all the way through to this point where now you know these are the things that we can start addressing realistically. In our program, we just don't leave the airlines there. We actually support them from that point onwards in a very specific way. Inside our program, we create tools, we create best practice, we create guidance, all based on this community approach that our airlines can then use and implement based on whatever issues they have found to be significant for them. I want to ask you a question as I'm drawing to a close. In your business, or perhaps even more specifically in your airline right now, how do you make decisions on environmental sustainability? Is it in a way where someone thinks it's a great idea to do a new initiative? Is it your airline or your business just responding on new legislation or perhaps new stakeholder expectations that just show up? Or is your business or your airline ahead of this curve, on top of everything that's going on associated with environmental sustainability, and can predict these things that are coming up? Thank you.